Senator Amy Klobuchar is the senior United States Senator from Minnesota. She's the first woman to be elected as a senator for Minnesota and is one of 20 female senators serving in the U.S. Congress. She previously served as county attorney for Hennepin County, and she was a legal advisor to former Vice President Walter Mondale. She's been named by the New York Times as one of 17 women most likely to become the first female president of the United States. Amy, we love you in Minnesota, but I want to warn you that we haven't had a good track record in trying to get people to the Oval Office. So, Senator Klobuchar.
Well, thank you very much, Lee, for that nice introduction. I will say, as you all know, we have had a good track record of getting vice presidents. And in fact, the joke about Minnesota, Matt, is that when a mom has her brand new baby on her knee, is bouncing the baby on the knee, looks at the baby and says, "One day anything's possible for you. You can grow up to be vice president." Okay, well, I want to thank you, Lee, for working to put this together, and also Tom. It's a very, very important conference. I want to thank Matt for his incredible leadership at Burlington Northern and the work that he does to bring freight and the investments that have been made in Minnesota, which is incredible. And also my good friend Jim Oberstar. Jim and I have similar Slovenian roots. He was happy to know that I was in Slovenia with my family in August hiking, which I had never brought my family there, and we had a blast. But my favorite line was a line the Slovenians, for some reason, kept saying to me that I passed on to my daughter for advice for college, which is, and I think we should all remember this as I head back to Washington on Sunday, the obstacles on the path are not the obstacles, they are the path. In any case, Jim, when he retired and left Congress, which we were so sad about, he said at the time he wasn't going to stop working on these incredible issues of transportation. I still remember the last day that people came to the floor, the House floor, and the senators went over there to hear it and gave tribute to Jim. There was a congressman from Pennsylvania who told the story of how Jim had come to his district and was able, without a note, to recite every single transportation project that had occurred in that town in Pennsylvania in 100 years. And the congressman actually went back and checked to see if it was all accurate, and it was. It is that kind of history and institutional knowledge that can make such a difference and still is making a difference for Minnesota, so thank you. I will note I was up in Duluth with Congressman Nolan over Labor Day weekend, and we were able to go to Cirrus, the plane manufacturer, which is expanding, and they were saying, Jim, about how we've gotten a bill passed through our committee and to speed up approval for some of their safety improvements. And they were saying how when the chips were down, it was Jim that stood up for that company, and now they're employing hundreds and hundreds of people, so thank you. There are many great elected officials here, Senator Dibble and State Representative Beard, I know, who are leading the way in our state legislature with a lot of the transportation projects that Matt mentioned. Louis Jambois, we were over at the port. I brought Senator Landrieu from New Orleans. I can do a great Mary Landrieu accent, but I won't do that now. Where we were talking about the need to improve our locks and the River Act, which I'm an original co-sponsor of, which the industry is actually willing to pony up more money in fees to pay for some improvements to our system on the rivers, which is so important, as Matt talked about, the intermodal transportation. And we got pieces of it in the Water Resources Development Act, but have a lot more work to do, and appreciate the industry support on that bill. I know Steve is here from C.H. Robinson, and I was just over at their company, which people don't always realize is a big, big company in Minnesota, and does a lot of work in helping companies to manage their transportation needs. Mahendra is here from Esser Steel. We're excited about that new project up on the Iron Range. Thank you for that. Scott Nagel, ADM Benson Quinn, where are you? Are you here? Oh, good. I was just with Patricia Wirtz yesterday at the White House. The woman head of ADM, and she's great. We were over there for the President's Export Council, and also thanks to Greg and Bill Gardner and everyone else who's going to be on the panels. I guess I'll start with that Export Council because it was interesting. Some of Matt's cohorts of the CEOs from across the country were there, the CEO of Boeing, Lockheed Martin, ADM, the CEO of Xerox. Literally every single person, Disney, brought up transportation, because as we look at this export economy, and I truly believe the way we get out of this downturn, and Minnesota knows it better than most states because we have one of the lowest unemployment now at 5.1% announced yesterday, but the key is more and more exports. We have to make stuff again in this country. We have to invent things and export to the world. And we're not going to be able to do that if we don't have a transportation system that matches our 21st century demands of our economy. And that's what this is all about. And I actually think it's one of the more exciting things we can do. I can't really give you an upbeat assessment about what's going on in Washington. I can tell you that in the past there's tended to be bipartisan support for transportation and infrastructure. And I still continue to believe, I see Frank Hornstein up there as well, one of our great House members who's done a lot of work in transportation, and I continue to believe that we're somehow going to break through this, and maybe the ugliness we're seeing right now on the debt ceiling and some of the implosion. Actually, we're now having intra-Tea Party implosions. This is a whole new thing that I thought could never happen. It's not just moderate Republicans. It's actually been really good on this. They don't want to let the debt ceiling lapse. They don't want to shut the government down. And McCain and others have been saying that this is foolishness, the height of foolishness. But we always knew there was that gap that's really developed now with Chris Christie being willing to take on some of the issues. But we now have intra-Tea Party fights between the House and the Senate. So while it's all very ugly and unfortunate, it may eventually lead to some breakthrough, because we just can't keep lurching from one financial crisis to the next. When there are, in fact, and I hope you believe me on this, a number of people, particularly in the U.S. Senate, that want to do some of these big things with infrastructure, get a long-term debt deal. And the Speaker and the President were very close to one at the end of last year. But a long-term debt deal that will lead to more investment and will get us on the right path, won't do anything sudden to cause what Chairman Bernanke called a sharp contraction. I like that because it reminded me of labor, but a sharp contraction to the economy, and do something that's more long-term. And when we look at what's long-term, what will keep us along with this export economy, which will keep us going, it's investment in certain things, not everything, but infrastructure, energy, education. I put those things right up front. And by the way, when we were doing that stimulus back when we had the worst of the downturn, it was Jim Oberstar that kept saying, why don't we just do infrastructure? But we won't go into that again. I was in agreement with him on this. Okay, let me get back to my speech now. Freight railroads have been a bright spot in our economic recovery, and I think Matt did a good job of pointing that out. And the fact that we have had this incredible, as they were showing early on when I walked in, and that graph with Minnesota, where we had a unique situation where immediately after the downturn, the rural areas were really quite strong with our agriculture economy, which was pointed out grew 9.4% a year compared to 3.1% a year from 2007 to 2012. Our manufacturing up 4.3% a year compared to 1.4% a year for the rest of the country. All of this helped us to keep our head above water. The fact that we have a diverse economy with everything from medical device to the medical Mayo and that whole industry, with the fact that we have food processing and ag that are interconnected, the fact that we have such strong retail in Minnesota, and we were able to weather the storm so much better than other places. But if I looked for a common thread between all these diverse industries, I would say it's exports, leading us again to the intermodal transportation and the importance. When we were up in Duluth, by the way, we were able to announce a $10 million grant for improvements on the port. And you can just see the role of freight rail in that as well, in the supply chain of wind turbine components that arrive at the port of Duluth, products that are imported from manufacturers in Germany that are delivered to major wind developments that are going right now in our state. The export economy in northeastern Minnesota supports 11,500 jobs, contributes more than $1.5 billion to the regional economy. So where are we in terms of infrastructure? Well, I think you've all heard these bad grades. The Civil Engineers 2013 report card gives our nation's infrastructure an overall D+ grade. Our railroads get a C+ grade. Way to go. And I think even though we are in the state of Minnesota, Matt, where in the words of our unofficial poet laureate, Garrison Keillor, we're a state where the women are strong, right? The men are good looking, right, Jim? And all the infrastructure is above average. It is not exactly where we want to be as we look at the long term and the possibility for companies like C.H. Robinson and Esser and others that simply want to expand. So we are, in fact, remain preeminent over countries like Brazil and others that are in the position to make the same kind of stuff that we do, to grow the same kind of crops that we do. And so that's why this declining investment in infrastructure is so concerning. What do you see going on? Well, China and India are starting to spend big time on their infrastructure, 9 and 8% of their GDP on infrastructure. What are we committing? 2%. Just 2%. And I just see this as such a possibility for growth if we, with the private sector and the public sector, make a major commitment to investment. I thought I would focus a little bit on some of the efforts going on in Washington. I always like to say that and try not to laugh, but there really are some good things happening. First of all, the safety upgrades, which you guys are aware with the positive train control and the work that's going on. And I know that Burlington Northern is actually one of the few railroads close to being on track to meet the deadline on the PTC. And I'm going to work with my colleagues to ensure that railroads that are trying to do the right thing and get the technology implemented will not be penalized for that. Because that is a major issue as we go forward. We want to make sure that the railroads that are doing the right thing get rewarded for that. And that's something that we'll be working on, and as a member of the Commerce Committee that I'll be working on. We also have the issue of Amtrak and passenger rail, that actually the Amtrak Empire Builder runs on BNSF tracks with the energy boom in western North Dakota. I was just out there with Senator Hoeven about a year ago and saw exactly what's going on there. It's obviously an incredible development for the economy with the natural gas and the oil. And so we've seen increase in some of the Empire Builder Route 2, and it's another example of the strong partnership we see between freight and passenger rail. And Jim, when he was in Congress, and I continue the push for that passenger rail piece of it. So that's another thing to keep watching for, and we've seen it in our cities here in the Twin Cities with some of the work that's going on. The other things that are happening is looking at how we can invest in infrastructure and really make this work. And Matt mentioned the work that's going on with the with that report and everything that came out. And it's just so disappointing for those of us that want to move forward. But again, when you look at the Senate budget, for instance, that passed, want to make clear, passed out of the Senate, that had an extra investment in infrastructure. The bill that I introduced, the Rebuild American Jobs Act, would have provided $27 billion for investment into transportation and infrastructure projects and would have provided $10 billion to capitalize a new national infrastructure bank. I got a majority of senators voting for that bill, but with the filibuster, we were unable to get it through. There is an exciting new development with the infrastructure bank. This has been reintroduced and introduced several times, but we're going to be introducing it soon. 4 of us, I'm going to be on it, and 4 Democrats. Senator Warner will be leading it of Virginia, and then we're going to have 4 Republicans on it as well. The idea is to have a national infrastructure bank which would serve as a complement to existing funding mechanisms and expand overall infrastructure investment. So those are some of the things that are happening right now, but I'd say one thing as you look at all the mess in Washington, the one bill that was able to come through the Senate, it was only a 2-year transportation bill, but was the work that Senator Boxer did with with Senator Inhofe, two of the most unlikely bedfellows, but they were able to negotiate a transportation bill with a 2-year window, and we were able to get it through on a bipartisan basis in the Senate. And then there was so much pressure on the House. They really did not want to do the bill. I think Speaker Boehner did, but a lot of the members didn't want to do it, and we were able to put enough pressure on to get the House to pass that bill, and it got through, and it meant $700 million to Minnesota over 2 years. So those are some of the bright spots of things that are happening. I also support the Railroad Rehabilitation and Improvement Program, which helps railroads, shippers, and states meet their rail infrastructure investment needs, as well the TIFIA program, which provides credit assistance for transportation products, including freight rail infrastructure, and helps to leverage private investments in these projects. I truly believe that by leveraging these federal dollars the right way, that we can dramatically improve our infrastructure in this country. But a few things have to happen to make it really move. We have to stop a small group of extremists from holding this country hostage. And by that, I am not talking about actually even the majority of the Republicans in Congress. I'm talking about a small group that are doing this right now. And my hope is that somehow the business community puts some pressure on this so this doesn't continue. Because we are literally on the cusp of a renaissance here. When you look at the worldwide economy and you look at how our numbers have been going up in terms of employment, in terms of investment, and so many other countries had written us off. I got to meet with Mark Zuckerberg, the CEO of Facebook. I made the mistake of not taking my picture with Mark Zuckerberg to put on Facebook yesterday, and we were thinking about the times back when they were writing off our country on technology and saying Japan was going to beat us out, and that just didn't happen. Time and time again, because of our innovation and our entrepreneurs, so many of them in the state of Minnesota, were able to defy expectations and defy all the negativity and move ahead. And I really feel like we're at that point right now with this increase in manufacturing and where we are in the world economy. But the only way we're going to really seize on it is to make some kind of they call it a grand bargain or deal on this budget, so we don't keep playing red light, green light with our tax system, so we make some sensible reforms. Once we do that, I would say the top of an area for bipartisan agreement for investment would be transportation. That historically has been true. You see that the support is there right now for it, and the fact that that was one of the few bills that got through. So that is the pledge I'll make for you. We're going to just continue to push and push and push, and as frustrated as you may get sometimes in Washington, please remember there are people that want to do the right thing, and please don't give up, because I think that there is still this possibility. I can't explain to you exactly how it will be done, but it has something to do with common sense prevailing and people understanding that courage in the next year is not just standing by yourself giving a speech, but courage is whether or not you're willing to stand next to someone you don't always agree with for the betterment of this country. They've done it at the state. We can do it in Washington, and just with a little guidance and vision from Jim Oberstar, we'll get it done. Thank you, everybody. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Senator Klobuchar.